the way that it started is I have my little collection right here. Look, you can see the cover is just a sexy broad, like with, the moonshine jugs holding as sort of a bikini top. Fuck up. Anyway, where the idea for the collection came from was I quit drinking in 2022. I quit drinking, I quit doing coke, and I had quit heroin some years before. Yeah, just not, one by one, really dragging it out as long as possible. And I thought that my next essay collection was going to be about sobriety, just sobriety. And I wrote a handful of essays, and it became clear early on that just sobriety was kind of limiting me because it would be like, here's the essay about my relationship to cocaine, and here's the heroin one, and here's the liquor one. And it's like, okay, how do I break out of this? Like, how do I not write just the Charlie Sheen story, but it's my name instead of his? And I thought, okay, well, let me talk to my publisher. And their take was that this is really an essay collection about bad behavior, not drinking, not addiction by itself, but just something deeper, the little devil inside that tells you to drink and that tells you go do a bunch of blow and sleep with someone's boyfriend and just do everything horrible all the time. Get the most attention for yourself and like damn the consequences. And that was helpful. And so the essays in here, many of them are about addiction, but what they're all about is just shitty qualities that I have and my attempts to reckon with them and my attempts to make myself into a person that I can live with. And it was very important to me not to write that book and then have every essay end on an up note. I didn't want to write the super corny book about how I used to be a fuck up and now I'm fixed, because that is in no way true. I told like six lies just on my way back to the apartment from the gym. Like all the bad stuff is still in here. So this is a book about living with the demons and doing business with them in a way where I'm not just selfish and evil and just like mistreating people all the time. I'm putting other people first and doing the shady shit once in a while. I can never do it again. Oh my God, that essay, Shoplifting from Brandy Melville, is, it's got a fun title, and I think for maybe that reason, it's the one that people are most familiar with. It was published in The Cut. Like it got a lot of attention out of all the essays in this book, such that I can never shoplift from Brandy Melville again. Like the Washington Post profiled me and they were like, hey, there's shoplifting at Brandy Melville. And I'm like, you're blowing up my spot. Like everybody's blowing up my spot. Brandy Melville is this clothing store for teeny tiny girls. It's all their clothes, their big thing is their clothes are all one size and the size is tiny. And so I mean, one of the things I will admit about drinking is I immediately lost a shit ton of weight because I was putting away like 1,000 extra calories of hard liquor, every day. And I stopped doing that. And so I was like a tiny person. And I'm like, let me check out this Brandy Melville business that I've been hearing so much about. And they have a lot of legitimately cute stuff. And also I had a lot of evil like in me that I needed some outlet for. I wasn't going out and getting drunk and like ruining my relationships every night. And I was starting to really feel the Jones to just make a little bit of trouble. And so I went to Brandy Melville and I stole a bunch of shit. I'm not proud of it, but I did do it. And then I did it a bunch more times. And I guess maybe I am proud of it because I wrote the essay about doing it. But like that's, as you originally pointed out, like that's very much an essay about how you can get rid of the addictions themselves. You can get rid of the substances. You can't just stamp out the behavior so easily. It finds a way out. And I think that, Brandy Melville is owned by some questionable people, and I am completely fine with ripping them off at the corporate level, and I'm always going to be fine with that. But I feel like every store probably has my author photo like behind the register or something at this point. I've been talking about shoplifting from them for 6 straight months now. I don't think I can do it anymore. I always feel like I'm pulling one over on people though, because I get that question sometimes. What's it like to be so vulnerable on the page? And I get notes from people as well, especially with this second collection. I get a lot of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, fan mail from other people who have struggled with addiction and thanking me, for what you describe as pouring my soul out on the page. And I feel like I'm
Doesn't
ripping
feel like that
everybody
to
off.
you?
It's not what I'm doing. Like I write about stuff that is dark and shameful, certainly, and especially stuff that is very shameful for other people. I mean, shame is a huge part of the disease. It's a big thing that keeps people out there drinking longer, is just too much shame to love yourself and try and pick yourself up off the floor. But it's not shameful for me. Like the stuff in my life that I'm genuinely ashamed of, to the point that like writing about it would make me want to die. I'm not going to put that in a book and publish it. And I think that's important for people to absorb, especially if you're someone who wants to write memoir yourself, is definitely go to the dark places, and extract from them whatever feels right to extract, but never ever publish anything in a book that you couldn't live with like your worst enemy knowing, because realistically, how many people read anymore? My worst enemies, such as they are, they're probably not like reading my books and looking for weak spots in my armor to, mess up my life with. But you need to, I think, carry in your head the possibility that your work will be read by bad actors and will be read by people who aren't going to thank you for your vulnerability, who are going to see it as shameful. And so, what can you put on the page that's not going to be shameful for you to the point you can't live with it, that's still going to make for, effective writing? I think that's important. So, probably my two favorites in here are Front of House and Domesticating the Wolf of Wall Street. Front of House being my history, my personal history of restaurant work, which I'm embarrassed to say I sucked shit at. I waited tables for so long. I never got good at it. But that came from thinking, there's a whole lot of literature from the chef's perspective and really not that much writing by like servers and hostesses and things like that. And I wanted to contribute to that canon. And then Domesticating the Wolf of Wall Street is about the movie, as well as the books that the movie is based on, The Wolf of Wall Street, and specifically about the wolf himself, like what I see as his take on addiction, because as far as I know right now, he's still sober, and he talks about his sobriety, and it's a very different sobriety from like the classic 12-step sobriety. He comes at it from a different place. He's a very different guy from me, but he and I both suffer from the same like grimy little disease. And so I wanted to, I guess, to look at the movie and the book in the context of the disease. The book and the movie, they're really not about addiction straightforwardly, but that was the piece of them that was most interesting to me, especially since the movie, Martin Scorsese famously, used to have drug problems. I assume he doesn't now due to being like 80 years old, but he was a big user. And so I think that his take on the the druggier parts of the story was really interesting.
I think it's really you call the therapist office that your therapist a soft-handed little typer. That's great.
Yeah, I had to go to PT for a while. This is from the essay Up from Sloth, which is about me like working out and being very bad at working out, being very lazy. But for a time, yes, I had some pain in my shoulder, and I was being, it must be said, such a little bitch about it, and to the point that my husband was like, "You need to go to the doctor now. Like, I cannot listen to you complain anymore." And I did, and the doctor sent me to PT, and everyone in the physical therapist's office, like either they were visibly very, very injured, or they were really old, or they were wearing a uniform associated with like hard physical work, like they were wearing a high-vis vest or, an MTA uniform, whatever. And then I'm in there with my like ouchy little shoulder pain, and I'm a writer, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is embarrassing. Like, this is the most embarrassed I have been in a very long time, is to be here with something that's really not a true injury, taking up this physical therapist time with my, little typing person injuries. That was the source of the pain in my shoulder, was that I was like sitting at my computer, hunched over like a little goblin, and it gave me a repetitive stress injury. Incredibly embarrassing stuff. Like that detail was almost too embarrassing to include. You were asking me like what's the what stuff is in your book that's like dark and scary and shameful. It's not the addiction stuff. It's the times that I have been shown to be like a whiny little writer.
What about Little MS, Little Miss?
Oh, what's that one called? Ms. Girl Power?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's, very similar dynamic to the one that's about me being a lazy exerciser. But that one's more about being a lazy feminist, which I certainly was as a teenager and young adult. I'd like to think I'm not such a lazy feminist now. I have more serious political commitments. But at the time, I was just like, oh my God, feminism. Finally, a thing to like throw in my mom's face when she wants me to do my own laundry or whatever. Like, would you ask a boy to do his own laundry? That's how I used it, was as a cudgel against people. And no, yeah, not appropriate. Maybe this is something you'll be able to relate to as a writer, but I have told myself things in writing about them that I didn't know I knew. Like I have kind of written myself into a certain amount of wisdom about my experiences. And it's a type of wisdom that I haven't been able to come by any other way. Like I've been in and out of talk therapy for what, like 20 years now. I've done all the stuff that a person is supposed to do to get right in their head. I've, meditation, yoga. I mean, I love yoga, but nothing has ever worked on my, my perception and my ability to have a solid perspective on the world. Like writing. Writing is the thing that I use to like educate myself. I read and I write. Those are the things that do it. And you talk about as an inhabitor, being about the writer as inhabitor. And in your case, that's a pretty straightforward thing. You're having to somewhat literally inhabit these people whose memoirs you're co-writing. You have to.
Bratty rock stars and R&B and hip hop.
Right.
There,
You
so
have to
yeah.
like make it sound like them, and you have to not only tell the story, but tell it in a way that it's going to sound like them. And I'm doing something similar. Excuse me, I write about myself most often. I write a lot of memoir. And so I'm having to make sure it sounds like me. I teach memoir writing, and this is the piece of advice I give all my students, probably the most important memoir advice I have, which is if this book does not sound like you, if it sounds mannered or like you're trying to impress a reader or awkward in that way where like it's just not your voice, it's going to fail. Like everything else about your memoir can be amazing. If it doesn't sound like you, it's a failure. Like memoir lives and dies by its ability to sound like the memoirist. And that's exactly what I try and do as I'm writing, is not just to get the thoughts out, but to get them out in a way that it sounds like me talking. This is from the essay, The Temple of Feminine Perfection, and it's about the time that I spent working in strip clubs. My coworkers must have noticed how much time I spent sniffling in the dressing room. Frankly, there was always someone sniffling in there, but those women cried briefly and for a reason, while I cried more typically, at length and at random. But similar rules apply in the strip club dressing room as in a men's locker room. Keep your eyes to yourself, and if something untoward seems to be happening, it is not your business. The only coworker who ever addressed my behavior was even newer to the job than I was. She must not have known the etiquette yet. Her weird choice of stripper name was Anne, an unadorned name that never sounded right when the DJ announced one of her stage sets. Imagine it now, a deep-voiced man using his best put your hands together voice to say, and now, welcome to the stage, Anne. Are you okay? No, I mean, she corrected herself. You're not okay. I can see that. Her question asked and answered, I looked up at her through wet eyes, unsure of where this conversation could go. Do you want to talk about it? There's nothing to talk about, I mumbled. She nodded, probably assuming I meant things in my life were so fucked that I didn't even know where to begin, as opposed to what I did mean, which is that I was just as curious as she was about why I was crying. She showed me a picture of her boyfriend, a much older man about whom the kindest thing I could think to say was that at least the shadow from his bucket hat hid most of his rodent face. Beautiful, I said. It was the wrong word, but she'd caught me off guard with how profoundly hideous he was. Then she asked me whether I wanted to come out with them after work to a place where I could make some real money, and the equation solved itself in my head. One middle-aged scumbag in a bucket hat, plus one young and outgoing stripper girlfriend, plus one invitation to the lowest earner in the dressing room to make some real money equals pimp. I declined the invitation, and she thumbed away my running mascara before leaving the dressing room for her stage set, telling me to let her know if I changed my mind. The next day, Anne was gone. My manager, Adina, told me she'd run out on the last hour of her shift with a customer. She'd called the club in the morning to say she was in Detroit and she quit. The biggest surprise was that she'd called.